Grant Holloway stepped out of the black Mercedes S-Class as if the entire city belonged to him. Beside him, Madison Cross adjusted the sleeve of her black Dior dress and smiled for the photographers waiting outside the Ritz-Carlton. The Cartier bracelet on her wrist caught the light. Grant noticed it and felt a brief sting of memory. He had bought that bracelet 6 months earlier with money from the account he once shared with his wife. It was supposed to be Evelyn's gift after their daughter was born. Now it belonged to Madison. Inside Aurelia, one of Manhattan's most exclusive restaurants, the host led them past quiet tables covered in white linen. Beyond the windows, the Manhattan skyline glittered above the city. Several investment bankers recognized Grant. A board member raised his champagne glass. 2 reporters whispered near the bar. That was exactly what Grant wanted. By tomorrow morning, everyone on Wall Street would know he had moved on. Madison sat across from him and placed her iPhone beside her glass. "To the merger," she said. "To the future," Grant replied. Their company's planned merger was worth $2.4 billion. Once it closed, Grant would become one of the most powerful financial executives in New York. There was only one remaining problem. "Evelyn, my attorney says she'll sign soon," Grant said. "She has no money left to fight me." Madison tilted her head and asked about the baby. Grant took a slow drink. "She'll use the baby to get sympathy. That's what women like Evelyn do when they have nothing else." Madison smiled, but beneath the table, her phone continued recording. Grant leaned back with the confidence of a man who believed every danger had been removed. "By next month, she'll be living in some small apartment, begging me to cover the medical bills." The restaurant doors opened. The room didn't become completely silent, but the change was immediate. Conversations softened. Several guests turned. Roman Duca entered first. He wore a charcoal suit without a tie. 2 security men followed several steps behind him. Newspapers often called Roman a mafia boss, though no court had ever convicted him of a crime. Grant's expression hardened. Duca Maritime had recently challenged one of Grant's largest property acquisitions. Roman wasn't merely dangerous, he was a business rival. Then Grant saw the woman walking beside him. His glass stopped halfway to his mouth. Evelyn Parker, his pregnant ex-wife, wore a simple dark blue maternity dress beneath a cream coat. One hand rested protectively over her stomach. She looked tired, but she didn't look broken. She looked calm. Roman placed a hand near her back without touching her. He pulled out her chair, asked for sparkling water, and quietly told the waiter that she needed a low-sodium meal. Grant stared at them. Madison watched his face carefully. "Do you know her?" she asked, though she already knew the answer. Grant stood so quickly that his chair scraped against the marble floor. He crossed the restaurant before Madison could stop him. Evelyn looked up as his shadow fell across the table. "How long?" Grant demanded. Her face tightened. "How long? What? How long have you been sleeping with him?" A nearby conversation stopped. Someone lifted a phone. Evelyn glanced at Madison, then at the Cartier bracelet. "You brought your mistress to the restaurant where we celebrated our 5th anniversary, and you came here to question me." Grant lowered his voice, but his anger remained clear. "You're carrying my child while sitting with a criminal." Roman slowly stood. Grant gave him a cold smile. "Does she know what kind of man you are?" Roman didn't react. Evelyn's eyes were wet, but her voice remained steady. "You lost the right to judge the company I keep when you threw me out while I was pregnant." Grant looked around and saw 2 board members watching. His humiliation turned cruel. "Duca will abandon you when he understands that baby belongs to another man." Roman stepped between them. "She isn't my lover." Grant laughed and asked why he was protecting her. Roman looked directly into his eyes. "Because she has evidence that could send several people in this room to prison." Evelyn removed a sealed envelope from her handbag and placed it on the table. At that moment, phones began vibrating across the restaurant. Grant's board members were receiving the same emergency notice. The merger had been suspended. Evelyn suddenly gasped and gripped the edge of the table. Her face lost all color. Roman caught her before she fell. As Grant watched his pregnant ex-wife being carried toward an ambulance, his attorney called with a devastating warning. Every illegal transaction under investigation carried Evelyn Parker's electronic signature. 8 years earlier, Grant Holloway had owned almost nothing. His office sat above a small pharmacy in lower Manhattan. The carpet smelled damp. The air conditioner failed every summer, and the company's only conference table had been purchased from a closing law firm. Grant had 2 suits, an old sedan, and more debt than clients. But he also had a dream. That was what Evelyn Parker first loved about him. They met at a financial compliance seminar where Evelyn was presenting a case involving stolen charitable funds. Grant approached her afterward, carrying a paper cup of coffee and a notebook filled with questions. "You see things other people miss," he told her. No man had ever admired her mind so openly. Their first dates were simple. They ate takeout on the floor of Grant's office, walked through Central Park, and talked about building a company ordinary families could trust. Grant promised Evelyn that success would never change him. For a while, she believed him. When Holloway Capital nearly collapsed after losing its largest client, Evelyn used almost all her savings to keep the employees paid. She left a secure position at an accounting firm and worked beside Grant without a formal title. She designed the company's compliance system, reviewed investment contracts, and discovered hidden debts inside 2 businesses Grant wanted to purchase. Her work saved the company millions. Whenever she asked whether her name should appear on official documents, Grant kissed her forehead and said they were building everything together. "We don't need papers to prove what we are," he told her. "You're my wife. Half of everything I become belongs to you." Evelyn trusted him. As Holloway Capital grew, their lives changed quickly. The office above the pharmacy became a glass tower near Wall Street. Grant replaced his old sedan with a Mercedes S-Class. Financial magazines called him a visionary. Evelyn remained behind the scenes. Grant said investors responded better to one strong founder. He told her that appearing publicly might confuse the company's message. She accepted it because she believed protecting his image protected their future. Then they began trying to have a child. The first pregnancy ended after 9 weeks. Grant held her in the hospital and cried with her. He promised they would survive the loss together. The second pregnancy ended later. Evelyn began bleeding during a board meeting. She called Grant 3 times before a receptionist finally told her he couldn't leave because an overseas investor had arrived unexpectedly. She sat alone beneath the cold hospital lights while the life inside her disappeared. Grant came 4 hours later carrying a Starbucks that had already gone cold. "I'm sorry," he said. The company couldn't stop because something unexpected happened. Something unexpected. That was how he described the child they had lost. Evelyn turned her face toward the window so he wouldn't see the moment something inside her broke. Months later, she began treatment again. She gave herself injections in the bathroom before preparing Grant's investor presentations. She attended appointments alone and smiled whenever people asked when they planned to start a family. When the doctor finally told her she was pregnant, Evelyn cried until she could barely breathe. Grant seemed happy at first. He ordered a handmade crib, placed an ultrasound photograph inside his Mont Blanc planner, and promised he would attend every medical appointment. But as the merger approached, his promises disappeared. That was when Madison Cross joined Holloway Capital. She was polished, confident, and always available when Grant worked late. She praised every decision he made and laughed at jokes Evelyn had heard for years. Grant began coming home with unfamiliar perfume on his shirts. Evelyn tried to ignore it until she found a hotel charge on a corporate credit card. When she confronted him, Grant didn't apologize. He stared at her as if she had committed the betrayal. "You went through my financial records," he said. Evelyn replied, "I helped create the system." He told her, "You're pregnant, exhausted, and imagining things." He placed his hand on her shoulder and lowered his voice, saying this anxiety wasn't healthy for the baby. For days, Evelyn wondered whether he was right. Then she discovered something worse than the affair. Millions of dollars had been transferred through consulting firms with no employees, no offices, and no real services. Several approvals carried her electronic signature. Evelyn hadn't approved them. She asked Grant to authorize an independent audit. 2 days later, his attorney delivered divorce papers. Grant removed her access to the company, froze their joint accounts, and informed the board that Evelyn had never held an official position. He also leaked private information about her previous miscarriages and anxiety treatment to support the story that she had become emotionally unstable. By the time he ordered her out of their Park Avenue penthouse, Evelyn was 7 months pregnant and had less than $2,000 available. She left carrying one suitcase, her MacBook Air, and the ultrasound photograph Grant had abandoned on his desk. Now in the hospital after collapsing at Aurelia, Evelyn opened her eyes to find Grant sitting beside her bed. White roses rested on the table. For one dangerous moment, he looked like the young man from the office above the pharmacy. "I was terrified," he whispered. His voice cracked as he looked toward her stomach. Evelyn's eyes filled with tears. Grant reached for her hand. "We don't have to destroy each other," he said. "We can fix this before our daughter is born." A part of Evelyn wanted to believe him. She wanted the years of love, sacrifice, and grief to mean something. Then Grant placed a document beside her hand. "All you have to do is sign this statement," he said softly. "Confirm that Roman Duca manipulated you, surrender the MacBook, and withdraw your objection to the merger." Evelyn stared at him. The tenderness vanished from his face when she pulled her hand away. "You didn't come because you were afraid for the baby," she said. "You came because you were afraid of what I know." Grant stood and adjusted his jacket. "If you refuse, my attorneys will request an emergency psychological evaluation." Evelyn's heartbeat quickened. Grant looked down at her stomach. "And when the baby is born, I'll ask the court to place her with the parent who can actually protect her." He left the white roses behind. Evelyn waited until the door closed before she allowed herself to cry. Then her phone vibrated. A message had arrived from Madison Cross. "I can prove Grant forged your signature. Meet me alone and don't tell Roman." Attached to the message was a recording of Grant saying, "Once the baby is born, I'll take the company and the child away from her." Roman Duca didn't take Evelyn back to the hospital after she was discharged. Instead, he drove her north to a private estate in Westchester, far from the photographers waiting outside her temporary apartment. The house was large, but it didn't feel like a palace. There were no marble statues or gold decorations. The rooms were quiet, warm, and carefully guarded. Evelyn noticed the cameras before she noticed the gardens. "You expect trouble," she said. Roman closed the front door behind them. "I always expect trouble." That answer didn't comfort her. For most of New York, the Duca name meant ports, hotels, trucking companies, and whispered stories about organized crime. Roman had never been convicted of anything, but newspapers still called him a mafia boss whenever they needed a frightening headline. Evelyn stood in the center of the living room with one hand beneath her stomach. "I need the truth," she said. "Not the version you give reporters. Not the version you give your lawyers." Roman studied her for a moment. Then he nodded. 3 months earlier, one of his compliance officers had discovered that several companies connected to Holloway Capital were using accounts once controlled by Roman's uncle, Salvatore Duca. Those accounts had been part of an old network used to hide money through shipping contracts, construction projects, and empty consulting firms. Roman had spent 6 years trying to remove that network from his family's legitimate businesses. "Then why were you watching me?" Evelyn asked. Roman didn't deny it. "Because your name appeared beside several transfers." "You thought I was involved?" she asked. "I thought you might be holding records without understanding what they were." Evelyn felt cold despite the warmth of the room. "So you had me followed?" "Yes." "For how long?" 11 weeks. Her eyes filled with anger. Roman continued before she could speak. "At first, I planned to recover the records before they reached my uncle or the federal government." Evelyn stared at him. "You plan to steal from me, if necessary." The honesty hurt more than a polished lie would have. She turned away and looked through the window at the dark trees beyond the lawn. "Then why did you help me?" Roman's voice softened. "The man watching you saw Grant remove your belongings from the penthouse. He saw you sit on the sidewalk in the rain because you had nowhere to go. He saw you refuse to call your sick mother because you didn't want to frighten her." Evelyn remembered that night. She had sat beside one suitcase, holding her MacBook beneath her coat while rain soaked through her shoes. Grant's security team had locked the doors behind her. She had been too ashamed to call anyone, Roman continued. "When I learned you were pregnant, I changed the order. No one was to touch your computer. No one was to approach you without my permission. That doesn't make you a good man, Evelyn said. No, Roman replied. It doesn't. His answer silenced her. He walked to a cabinet and removed a sealed file. Inside were copies of official documents and signed statements. Roman explained that he had been cooperating with a federal task force led by Special Agent Rachel Monroe. He had provided information about illegal shipping routes, shell companies, and former Duca associates. His uncle didn't know. If Salvatore discovered the truth, Roman would become a traitor in the eyes of his own family. And now I'm involved, Evelyn said. You were involved before I met you. Roman showed her a list of transactions. Several carried her electronic signature. The dates made her stomach tighten. One transfer had been approved the night she lost her second pregnancy. At that exact hour, Evelyn had been alone in a hospital bed, waiting for Grant to arrive. He used my account while I was bleeding, she whispered. Roman didn't answer. He didn't need to. Evelyn sat down slowly. For years she had carried the shame of that night. She had wondered whether she had failed as a woman, as a wife, and as a mother. Now she understood that while she was grieving their child, Grant had been using her identity to protect himself. The realization broke something inside her. She covered her face and began to cry. Roman remained across the room. He didn't touch her. He didn't tell her to be strong. He simply waited. After several minutes, Evelyn lowered her hands. Why do you care whether my baby survives? She asked. Roman's expression changed. He walked to a bookshelf and picked up a silver frame. The photograph showed a little girl with dark curls sitting on his shoulders. Her name was Sophia, he said. She was 6 when she died. Evelyn looked at him. Roman explained that Sophia had leukemia. He had spent her final year fighting his uncle for control of the family businesses. He missed appointments, birthdays, and nights when she asked for him. I kept telling myself I was protecting her future, he said, but I wasn't present for the life she still had. His voice broke. Evelyn had never expected to see grief in the eyes of a man people feared. When she died, my wife left, Roman continued. She said she couldn't live beside a man who understood power better than love. He returned the photograph to the shelf. I couldn't save my daughter, but I won't stand by while another child is used as leverage. Evelyn felt her anger weaken, though her caution remained. You don't get to control me because you want to repair your past. I know. If I stay here, I make my own decisions, yes. And no one touches my computer. No one. For the first time, Roman almost smiled. Evelyn's phone rang. It was her mother. Teresa's voice sounded weak after dialysis. She had seen the restaurant photographs online. People are saying terrible things, Teresa whispered. They say you left Grant for that man. Evelyn closed her eyes. It isn't true, Mom. Then come home. I can't. Why not? Evelyn looked at Roman, the guards outside, and the financial records spread across the table because someone had stolen her name. Because her husband wanted her child, and because a dangerous family now knew she existed. But she couldn't tell her sick mother any of that. I'm just handling the divorce, Evelyn said. Teresa became quiet. You always say you're fine when you're breaking. The truth in those words was too much. After the call ended, Evelyn went into the guest room and cried silently, pressing a pillow against her mouth so no one would hear. Roman remained outside the door. An hour later, his technology specialist arrived with an urgent report. The illegal transfers hadn't only been approved while Evelyn was in the hospital. The system logs showed they had been created from a device registered inside Grant's private Park Avenue study. But the final authorization had come from Evelyn's own MacBook Air, while the computer was locked inside the suitcase beside her bed. The hearing began 3 days later inside a family courtroom in Manhattan. Evelyn sat beside Nora Whitman with both hands resting over her stomach. Her blood pressure had been high since morning, but she refused to miss the hearing. Across the aisle, Grant looked calm in a dark navy suit. Madison sat behind him. She wore a soft cream coat and held a small shopping bag from a luxury baby store. When photographers had gathered outside the courthouse, she had made sure they saw the tiny blanket inside. The message was clear. Madison wanted the public to imagine her raising Evelyn's child. Grant's attorney, Charles Weller, stood before the judge. Mr. Holloway isn't trying to punish his former wife, he said. He's trying to protect his unborn daughter from an unstable environment. Nora's jaw tightened. Weller presented photographs of Roman's estate, newspaper articles about the Duca family, and reports describing Roman as a suspected organized crime figure. None of the articles proved Roman had committed a crime. That didn't matter. The words Mafia boss appeared in every headline. Weller then produced private medical records from Evelyn's treatment after her miscarriages. He read from notes describing panic attacks, insomnia, and severe grief. Evelyn felt exposed before a room full of strangers. Those sessions had been the only place where she allowed herself to admit how frightened and alone she felt. Now Grant was turning her pain into evidence against her. My client is deeply concerned, Weller continued, that Mrs. Parker's emotional state combined with her association with Mr. Duca places the child at risk. Nora stood. My client sought help after losing 2 pregnancies. Treatment isn't evidence of instability. It's evidence that she acted responsibly. She presented Evelyn's prenatal records. Every appointment had been attended. Every medical instruction had been followed. Nora also showed that Evelyn had never been charged with a crime and that her stay at Roman's estate was temporary protection following public threats. The judge listened carefully. Then Grant took the witness stand. He spoke softly. He described Evelyn as brilliant but fragile. He said pregnancy had changed her. He claimed she became suspicious, searched private files, and accused loyal employees without proof. I still care about her, Grant said. She's the mother of my child. Evelyn looked at him. He performed concern so perfectly that even she might have believed him years earlier. Grant lowered his eyes. I only want our daughter born somewhere safe. Nora approached him. Did you remove Mrs. Parker from the marital home while she was pregnant? She asked. Our marriage had become unsafe, he replied. Did she threaten you? Not physically. Did you freeze your joint accounts? I protected company assets. Did you cancel the health insurance she received through Holloway Capital? Grant paused, then said she was no longer employed there. Nora placed a document on the screen. It showed that Evelyn's insurance had been canceled 4 hours after she released an independent investigation into suspicious transfers. Grant's expression changed for only a second. Nora saw it. So the cancellation wasn't related to the divorce, she said. It happened after she questioned financial activity inside your company. Weller objected. The judge sustained the objection and warned Nora to keep the hearing focused on the child. Evelyn understood the problem. Every financial crime mattered to her life, but family court wasn't the place to prove it. The judge ordered Evelyn to complete an independent psychological evaluation. She was also required to provide advance notice of her residence and remain within New York State until the next hearing. Grant didn't receive medical control over the baby, but Evelyn didn't truly win. The residence order meant she could no longer move secretly. If someone wanted to find her, legal paperwork would show where she stayed. Outside the courtroom, reporters surrounded Grant and Madison. Grant asked them to respect Evelyn's privacy while standing beneath the brightest cameras. Madison held the baby's store bag against her chest. Evelyn tried to pass without speaking, but Grant followed her into a quiet hallway. You can still end this, he said. She kept walking. I'll withdraw the evaluation request, he continued. I'll restore your medical coverage and pay your mother's hospital bills. Evelyn stopped. Grant knew Teresa's treatment was becoming more expensive. He knew exactly which wound to press. What do you want? She asked. The MacBook, every backup your claim against the merger, and any interest connected to your father's trust. Evelyn stared at him. She had never told Grant that Teresa had recently mentioned her father's old documents. How do you know about the trust? Grant's face became still. Then he smiled. You're tired, Evelyn. You hear things that were never said. He turned the conversation against her as easily as breathing. Evelyn's hands trembled. Did you ever want this baby? She asked. Grant glanced toward the courthouse doors. Of course, no cameras, no lawyers. Tell me the truth. His expression hardened. I wanted a family when it supported the life I was building. Evelyn felt the final thread between them break. Grant stepped closer. If you force me to choose between one child and a company supporting thousands of families, I'll choose the company. He walked away before she could answer. That evening, Evelyn returned to the protected estate and completed the psychological evaluation by video. For 2 hours, she described the miscarriages, the affair, and the night Grant threw her into the rain. When it ended, she sat alone beside the window and cried. Her phone vibrated. A message appeared from Madison. Grant is going to destroy both of us. I have proof he forged your signature. Roman warned Evelyn not to answer. Madison sent a second message containing an audio file. Grant's voice filled the room. Once the baby is born, I'll take the company and the child away from her. Evelyn's blood turned cold. Then Madison sent one final line. Come alone tomorrow or I'll delete everything. What Evelyn didn't know was that Madison had already hidden malicious software inside the evidence she was preparing to give her. The next afternoon, Evelyn entered the hotel cafe alone. At least that was what Madison was meant to believe. Nora sat near the window with a newspaper open in front of her. Two of Roman's security officers waited in the lobby, dressed like ordinary business travelers. Roman himself had agreed to remain away. Evelyn had demanded that much. She didn't want Madison frightened into silence. Madison arrived 10 minutes late, wearing a beige coat and dark glasses. She carried a slim MacBook Pro case in one hand and kept looking over her shoulder. For the first time, she didn't look like the confident woman photographed beside Grant. She looked afraid. Thank you for coming, Madison said. Evelyn remained standing. You have 5 minutes. Madison slowly removed her glasses. Her eyes were red. Grant lied to me, she said. He told me your marriage had ended long before I came into his life. Evelyn's expression didn't change. He also told me you never wanted children. He said the pregnancy was an accident you were using to keep him. Evelyn felt the insult like a slap. She remembered the injections, the hospital rooms, and the 2 babies she had buried only in her heart because there had been no funerals. You knew he was married, Evelyn said. Madison looked down. Yes, you wore my bracelet. Madison moved toward the Cartier bracelet beneath her sleeve. She unclasped it and placed it on the table. I should never have accepted it. Evelyn stared at the diamonds. Grant had once shown her the bracelet through a store window on Fifth Avenue. When our daughter comes home, he had said, I'll buy it for you. Now, the gift sat between his wife and his mistress like evidence from a crime scene. I don't want it, Evelyn said. Madison's mouth trembled. I'm not asking you to forgive me. I'm asking you to understand that Grant is going to destroy me too. She opened the MacBook case and removed a small silver drive. It contained emails, recorded calls, and screenshots from Grant's private account. Madison claimed the files proved. Grant ordered the technology department to keep Evelyn's credentials active after removing her from the company. He said if regulators ever asked questions, everything would lead back to you. Evelyn felt sick. Why are you giving me this? Because he promised me equity after the merger. Yesterday, I asked him to put it in writing. Madison laughed bitterly. He told me trust should be enough. The words sounded painfully familiar. Grant had once told Evelyn the same thing when she asked for her work to be formally recognized. Madison leaned forward. He's already interviewing someone younger for my position. I saw the messages. Once the merger closes, he'll blame both of us and walk away clean. Evelyn studied her face. There were tears, but Evelyn couldn't tell whether they came from guilt or fear. Did you help him use my signature? Madison hesitated. I knew your account remained active. That wasn't my question. I approved communication plans. I didn't create the transfers, but you knew. Madison closed her eyes. Yes. The admission filled Evelyn with anger. This woman had watched Grant destroy her while helping manage the public story. Yet Evelyn also understood desperation. She understood what it meant to realize too late that the man beside you had never loved anyone more than himself. Madison pushed the drive across the table. The password is written inside the case. Evelyn didn't touch it. Nora will review it. Madison glanced toward the window and finally noticed the lawyer. You said you would come alone. I said I would meet you. I didn't promise to be careless. Madison's expression tightened, then softened again. Please, if Grant learns I gave you this, I'm finished. You made your choices, Evelyn said. Now you live with them. For a second, Madison's eyes became cold. Then the fear returned. I know. She stood and left the bracelet on the table. Nora joined Evelyn immediately. Don't open that drive on your computer, she said. They delivered it to an independent cybersecurity specialist. The drive was placed inside an isolated system with no connection to Evelyn's personal files. For the first hour, everything appeared genuine. The emails contained internal timestamps. The recordings matched Grant's voice. One message instructed an employee to make Evelyn the visible owner of every questionable approval. For the first time in weeks, Evelyn felt hope. She called Teresa from the hallway. "Mom, I think we found proof." Teresa began crying. "I knew the truth would come out." Evelyn pressed one hand over her stomach. "When this is over, I want you with me when the baby is born. I wouldn't miss it for anything." Teresa's voice sounded weak but happy. After the call, Evelyn returned to the examination room. The specialist was no longer smiling. "What happened?" Nora asked. "There's a second program hidden inside the files." He turned the screen toward them. The drive had attempted to copy legal documents, medical records, home addresses, and every message connected to Roman. The isolated computer had blocked most of the transfer, but not all of it. The malware had activated the moment Madison connected the drive to the hotel's wireless network before the meeting. It had already transmitted their location. Evelyn's phone rang. Grant's attorney had filed a new emergency motion using private medical details that had never been disclosed in court. Madison hadn't come to save Evelyn. She had come to steal the one thing Grant still needed, her legal strategy. That night, Evelyn moved into a secure apartment near the hospital. At 1:17 in the morning, the fire alarm screamed. Smoke poured beneath the front door. The elevator stopped. Evelyn reached the stairwell, but the metal door wouldn't open. Someone had locked it from the other side. A sharp pain crossed her abdomen, then another. She pressed both hands against her stomach and called for help. As the smoke grew thicker, Evelyn realized the person who had found her didn't intend to frighten her. They intended to make sure her baby never reached the hospital. The next morning, Evelyn pressed her sleeve over her mouth as smoke filled the hallway. The stairwell door wouldn't move. Another contraction tightened across her stomach, stronger than the first. She gripped the metal handle and forced herself to breathe slowly. "Please," she whispered to her daughter. "Not tonight." Her phone shook in her hand as she called emergency services. Before the dispatcher could finish asking for her location, someone struck the other side of the stairwell door. "Mrs. Parker." It was Marcus Lane, one of Roman's security officers. He hit the lock with a fire extinguisher. Once, twice. On the third strike, the damaged latch broke and the door flew open. Marcus wrapped his jacket around Evelyn's shoulders and guided her toward the service stairs. The smoke was thick, but there were no flames. Halfway down, Evelyn cried out and collapsed against the wall. Marcus caught her before she fell. "My baby, an ambulance is coming. I'm having contractions." He lifted her carefully and carried her down 6 flights while firefighters entered the building. At New York Presbyterian, doctors placed monitors around Evelyn's stomach and gave her medication to slow the contractions. Roman arrived 20 minutes later. His shirt was open at the collar, and his face carried a kind of anger Evelyn had never seen before. "Where is Madison?" he demanded. Special Agent Rachel Monroe stood near the hospital door. "We're looking for her." Roman turned toward one of his men and told him to find her before the police do. "No," Evelyn said. Her voice was weak, but everyone heard it. Roman looked at her. "You won't touch her," Evelyn continued. "You won't threaten her. You won't make her disappear. She tried to kill you," he said. "We don't know that yet," Evelyn replied. "The device was placed outside your apartment, and if you act like the man everyone says you are, Grant will use it against me." Roman's jaw tightened. Evelyn looked directly at him. "I won't protect my daughter by becoming part of another crime." For several seconds, Roman said nothing. Then he turned to his men. "You heard her. Cooperate with Agent Monroe. Nothing outside the law." Rachel studied him carefully. "That may be the first intelligent order you've given all year." Roman ignored the remark and moved closer to Evelyn's bed. "Are you both safe? For now." The doctor had stopped the labor, but Evelyn's blood pressure remained dangerous. She would need strict rest and constant monitoring. A fire investigator later confirmed that no real fire had started. A chemical smoke device had been placed near the apartment's ventilation system, and someone had jammed the stairwell lock. The purpose was clear. Someone wanted Evelyn terrified, trapped, and physically distressed. Security footage from a nearby traffic camera showed a man leaving the building shortly before the alarm. Agent Monroe identified him as Calvin Rusk, a private contractor previously questioned in corporate intimidation cases. Roman expected the payment trail to lead to Grant. It didn't. The money came from a shell account controlled by Madison Cross. Evelyn stared at the bank record. Grant didn't order it. "We can't say that," Rachel replied. "Madison may have acted for him, but the account is hers." Roman stood beside the window. She wanted Grant frightened. Rachel nodded. A public attack on his pregnant ex-wife creates pressure. It could delay the merger, freeze assets, or make him move money quickly. Evelyn understood. Madison wasn't simply helping Grant destroy her. She was creating chaos so she could steal from him, too. Across Manhattan, Grant remained unaware. He sat inside his Park Avenue penthouse, with Madison beside him, drinking expensive whiskey and reviewing plans for the merger announcement. Madison wore one of Evelyn's old silk robes. Grant had told her she could use anything left in the apartment. The court filing worked. He said, "Evelyn will be under supervision before the baby arrives." Madison poured him another drink. "And after the merger, we go to Europe for a few weeks, and my shares." Grant gave her an amused look. "We've discussed this. You promised me equity. I promised you a future. I want it in writing." Grant laughed. The sound was small but cruel. "You're becoming impatient. I helped protect you. You handled media calls and carried a flash drive." Madison's face changed. Grant leaned closer. "Don't confuse access with importance." For months, Madison had believed she was different from Evelyn. Younger, smarter, more useful. Now she heard the same contempt Grant had once used against his wife. She smiled and touched his shoulder. "You're right. I'm sorry." Grant accepted the apology because he expected obedience. After he fell asleep, Madison entered his study. She photographed account numbers, passport copies, and documents related to an offshore company in the Cayman Islands. Then she sent a message to Calvin Rusk. He had completed the apartment operation, but demanded more money. Madison told him the next payment would come after Grant transferred his emergency funds. Her plan was simple. She would frighten Grant into believing federal agents were closing in. He would move millions offshore. Madison would copy the access codes and disappear before he realized she had betrayed him. Back at the hospital, Evelyn received another visitor. Daniel Price had once served as Holloway Capital's technology director. Grant fired him 6 months earlier after Daniel questioned changes made to Evelyn's account. Daniel looked exhausted. His suit was wrinkled, and he kept checking his phone. "My son is at Mount Sinai," he explained. "He needs heart surgery." Evelyn invited him to sit. Daniel revealed that Grant ordered the technology department to keep Evelyn's credentials active after she lost access. He also maintained original server logs proving which devices created the false authorizations. "Will you testify?" Evelyn asked. Daniel looked toward the floor. "If Grant finds out, my son loses the insurance support his foundation arranged." Evelyn understood the fear in his face. She couldn't ask another parent to risk a child. Nora investigated immediately. By evening, she found a nonprofit medical program that could cover Daniel's son without Grant's company. Evelyn used part of her remaining legal fund to secure the transfer. When Daniel learned what she had done, he began to cry. "You barely have enough for yourself." "My daughter isn't the only child who matters." Daniel promised to deliver the original server logs the next morning. For the first time, Evelyn possessed a witness who could prove Grant framed her. But Grant reached Daniel first. A photograph arrived on Daniel's phone. It showed his son asleep in a hospital bed. Below it was one sentence: "Cooperate with Evelyn, and tomorrow's surgery will disappear." Daniel's hand shook as he opened the secure drawer containing the only complete copy of the server records. By midnight, the evidence Evelyn believed would save her was being carried directly into Grant Holloway's private office. Daniel Price entered Grant Holloway's private office shortly before midnight. He carried the server records inside a black laptop case, but his hands wouldn't stop shaking. Grant stood beside the window, looking down at Manhattan as if the city were another possession. "You made the right decision," Grant said. Daniel placed the case on the desk. "You promised my son's surgery would continue." Grant turned around slowly. "As long as you remain reasonable." Daniel hated himself for lowering his eyes. The records inside the case could prove that Grant had used Evelyn's electronic identity. They could clear her name and protect her unborn child, but Daniel could only see the photograph of his son sleeping in the hospital. Grant opened the case and examined the storage drive. Is this the only complete copy? Yes. Grant studied him. Daniel forced himself not to look away. After several seconds, Grant nodded to a security officer. The man placed the drive inside a metal container and destroyed it with an industrial degassing device. Years of evidence disappeared in less than a minute. Daniel felt as though he had helped bury an innocent woman. The next morning, he called Evelyn from a hospital hallway. The files were damaged. He lied. I tried everything. Evelyn closed her eyes. She was still recovering at New York. Presbyterian. A monitor tracked her daughter's heartbeat while Nora stood beside the bed. Can any part be recovered? Evelyn asked. No. Daniel's voice broke on the final word. Evelyn heard the guilt but mistook it for helplessness. You tried, she told him. Stay with your son. Daniel ended the call and began crying. Inside Evelyn's room, Nora placed the phone on the table. Without the server logs, they had no direct technical proof that Grant created the false authorizations. Madison's recordings were compromised, and the financial records still carried Evelyn's name. Grant's attorneys had also renewed their request for control over the baby after birth. Nora opened the latest settlement offer. Grant would restore Evelyn's medical insurance, pay Teresa's treatment costs, and allow supervised visits with the child. In exchange, Evelyn had to surrender every corporate claim and admit that she had accessed Holloway Capital's systems without authorization. He wants me to confess to something he did, Evelyn said. He wants a document he can show prosecutors. Evelyn looked through the nursery window down the hall. A nurse was carrying a premature baby small enough to fit against one shoulder. Her daughter could arrive at any time. For the first time, surrender felt possible. If signing kept Teresa alive and prevented a long custody battle, perhaps losing her name and her work was a price she had to pay. Roman entered quietly. He hadn't slept. His charcoal suit was wrinkled, and there was dried blood across one knuckle. Evelyn noticed it immediately. What happened? I questioned someone connected to the smoke device. You promised me there would be no violence. He attacked first. That's always the explanation men like you use. Roman's face tightened. I didn't come here to argue. No. You came because you think your fear gives you the right to make decisions for me. He glanced at the settlement papers. You can't sign that. You don't get to tell me what I can do. Grant will own the story forever. My mother may not survive another year without better treatment. My child may be taken from me before I can even hold her. Roman stepped closer but stopped before reaching the bed. If you surrender because you choose peace, I'll respect it. But don't surrender because Grant convinced you that you're alone. Evelyn's eyes filled with tears. You followed me. You planned to steal from me. You hid information about your family. How am I supposed to know that you're any different? Roman absorbed every word. You don't know yet, he said. I have to prove it. He left without asking her to trust him. That afternoon, Teresa arrived carrying an old wooden box. She looked weak after dialysis, but she refused the wheelchair offered by the nurse. Evelyn tried to smile. You should be resting. So should you. Teresa sat beside the bed and placed the box on Evelyn's lap. Inside was a black Mont Blanc fountain pen. Evelyn recognized it immediately. Her mother had said it belonged to her father, a quiet accountant who died when Evelyn was a child. He wanted you to have this when you were ready, Teresa said. Ready for what? Teresa looked toward Nora and then back at her daughter. For the truth. Evelyn's father hadn't been an ordinary accountant. Years earlier, he worked for the company that later became Holloway Capital. When the business was close to bankruptcy, he discovered hidden debts and created a restructuring plan that saved it. He accepted shares instead of a full cash payment. Those shares were placed in a trust for Evelyn. Grant knew, Teresa whispered. He found the trust papers after you married. Evelyn felt the room shift around her. He knew I owned part of the company. Yes. Grant hadn't merely erased her years of work. He had married a woman whose legal assets helped support his empire, then concealed them while forcing her to sign them away. Teresa began crying. I stayed quiet because Grant said exposing the trust would connect your father to dangerous investors. I thought I was protecting you. Evelyn held her mother's hand. You were afraid. I was wrong. Evelyn opened the pen. It felt heavier than an ordinary fountain pen. When she twisted the barrel, a narrow compartment appeared. Inside was a brass key and a strip of paper bearing a bank number. Nora immediately contacted the bank. The key belonged to a safe deposit box registered under Teresa's maiden name. 2 hours later, they opened it under federal supervision. Inside were the original trust documents, letters from Evelyn's father, and an old encrypted storage device. The device contained the design of an independent audit archive created before Holloway Capital became successful. Every major authorization had been copied automatically to an outside storage provider. Grant could destroy the company's servers. He could threaten Daniel, but he couldn't erase the independent archive. Access required Evelyn's voice and a physical recovery token stored in another company deposit box. Evelyn finally understood why Grant had been desperate to obtain her MacBook. The archive could expose everything. The following morning, Nora obtained access to the company's deposit box. When the metal drawer opened, it was empty. Only Grant's wedding ring remained inside. Beneath it was a handwritten message. You were never as intelligent as you believed. Roman examined the bank records and discovered the recovery token had been removed by a lawyer working for Salvatore Duca. Evelyn turned toward him. Roman's silence told her there was more. How long have you known Grant was working with your uncle? Roman looked at her with visible shame since before the dinner at the Ritz-Carlton. Evelyn realized the man she had begun to trust had brought her into that restaurant. Knowing Grant was connected to the same criminal network hunting her, and Roman had hidden the truth from the beginning. Evelyn stood in the bank's private conference room, staring at Roman as if she no longer recognized him. You knew Grant was working with Salvatore before that dinner. Roman didn't look away. Yes, and you still brought me there. I needed Grant to react. The answer landed harder than an apology could have. Evelyn gripped the edge of the table. So I was bait. No. You knew he might become angry. You knew reporters and board members would be there. You knew I was pregnant. I knew he would expose what he feared, and if I collapsed. Roman's silence answered her. Evelyn felt sick at Aurelia. She had believed Roman was the first person willing to stand beside her without using her. Now she understood that even his protection had begun as strategy. You're exactly like Grant, she said. You both call control protection. Roman's face tightened, but he didn't defend himself. I thought the operation was more important than your trust. My trust was never yours to spend. She turned to Nora. I'm leaving the estate. Roman stepped forward. Salvatore knows where you are. Then Agent Monroe can protect me. My people understand my uncle. Your people also followed me for 11 weeks. Roman stopped. Evelyn removed the security phone he had given her and placed it on the table. You don't get to decide which truths I can survive. She walked out with Nora without looking back. That evening, Evelyn moved into a federal protection apartment near New York Presbyterian. It was smaller than the Westchester estate, with plain furniture and no view of the skyline. For the first time in weeks, she felt that every object in the room belonged to no man. Roman didn't call. Instead, he sent Nora a complete copy of his cooperation agreement, financial records, and internal Duca reports. He also signed a declaration allowing Evelyn to use anything relevant in court. There was no message asking for forgiveness. That restraint hurt more than Evelyn expected. The following morning, Daniel Price arrived at the apartment. He looked pale and exhausted. Nora searched his bag before allowing him inside. Daniel stood before Evelyn with tears already forming in his eyes. The server records weren't damaged, he said. Evelyn went still. Daniel confessed that Grant threatened his son's surgery. He had delivered the only complete copy to Grant and watched it destroyed. I betrayed you, he whispered, after you helped my child. Evelyn's first emotion was rage. Her second was understanding. She imagined someone threatening her unborn daughter and knew there were choices a terrified parent might make that no outsider could judge easily. Is your son safe? She asked. Daniel began crying. Yes. Then sit down and tell us everything you remember. Daniel couldn't restore the destroyed records, but he knew the archive system. The physical recovery token wasn't enough to access it. The original account owner also had to confirm a specific phrase by voice. That account owner was Evelyn. Grant could possess the token, but he couldn't unlock the real archive without her. Hope returned so quickly that Evelyn almost distrusted it. Then Teresa disappeared. She had finished dialysis shortly after noon. Her driver found her wheelchair near the rear entrance, but Teresa was gone. Evelyn received a video call from an unknown number. Her mother sat inside a windowless room. She was frightened but conscious. A man held a phone near her face. Grant's voice came through the speaker. "I warned you to stop." Evelyn's hand tightened around her iPhone. "If you hurt her—" "I don't want to hurt anyone," Grant interrupted. "I want the access phrase." "You already have the token and you have the voice." Grant instructed her to open the archive portal and repeat the authorization sentence exactly. Agent Monroe traced the call while Nora recorded everything. Evelyn tried to delay. Teresa's captor removed her dialysis bandage. Blood began spreading along her sleeve. "Do it," Teresa cried. "Don't worry about me." Evelyn couldn't breathe. Grant sent the authorization phrase. Evelyn entered the portal on a secured MacBook. A red light appeared beside the voice verification window. She repeated the sentence. The system accepted it. Grant laughed softly. On his end, the archive opened. Thousands of files appeared, including approvals, hidden transfers, and recordings connected to Salvatore. Grant selected Delete All. The screen showed the files disappearing. He believed he had won. What Grant didn't know was that Evelyn had helped design the original system with her father. During voice authorization, one word controlled whether the user entered the real archive or a protected mirror. Grant's sentence contained the word authorize. Evelyn pronounced it with the older system's emergency variation, authorization. To an ordinary listener, the difference meant nothing. To the archive, it meant coercion. The system created a false environment, allowed Grant to perform a simulated deletion, and secretly transmitted the untouched files to the Securities and Exchange Commission, Agent Monroe, and the Independent Audit Committee. It also recorded Grant's voice, device address, and recovery token. He had identified himself while attempting to destroy evidence. 20 minutes later, Teresa was abandoned at a gas station in Queens. Evelyn reached her before the ambulance doors closed. She climbed inside and wrapped both arms around her mother. "I'm sorry," Teresa whispered. "You have nothing to be sorry for. I should have told you the truth years ago." Evelyn pressed her face against her mother's hair and finally allowed herself to sob. "You're alive. That's all I need." At the hospital, Teresa was treated for blood loss and exhaustion. Her condition stabilized. For several hours, Evelyn believed the worst was over. Then, 2 detectives entered the room. They asked Evelyn to stand and placed handcuffs loosely around her wrists, careful not to touch her stomach. Nora demanded an explanation. One detective played an audio recording. Evelyn's voice could be heard clearly, ordering someone to enter the financial archive and erase every file before federal investigators arrived. The sentence had been assembled from her recorded authorization. Madison had created one final piece of insurance for Grant. Reporters were already waiting outside. Evelyn looked toward her sleeping mother and felt her daughter kick beneath her heart. Minutes later, cameras captured the 8-month pregnant woman being led from the hospital in handcuffs, while Grant Holloway announced that he had finally exposed the true criminal behind his company's collapse. The handcuffs were loose, but the humiliation wasn't. Evelyn kept both hands in front of her stomach as detectives guided her through the hospital entrance. Camera flashes exploded across the sidewalk. Reporters shouted over one another. "Mrs. Parker, did you steal from Holloway Capital? Were you working with Roman Duca? Did you order the financial records destroyed?" Evelyn said nothing. Her blood pressure was already dangerously high. Every step sent a dull pain through her lower back, but she refused to give the cameras the image Grant wanted. She wouldn't collapse in front of them. Across Manhattan, Grant stood behind a podium inside Holloway Capital's headquarters. The company logo filled the screen behind him. Madison stood several feet away in a gray designer suit, her face arranged into careful sadness. "This is a painful day," Grant told the reporters. "Evelyn is the mother of my unborn daughter. I never wanted to believe she could be responsible." He paused as if the words were difficult, but no individual is more important than the employees and families who depend on this company. Grant claimed Evelyn had used her former access to approve illegal transfers. He said she joined Roman after the divorce and tried to destroy evidence when investigators began asking questions. He promised to protect the company. He also announced that his lawyers would seek emergency custody of the baby immediately after birth. Madison lowered her eyes to hide her satisfaction. For the first time, everything appeared to belong to her. The company, the penthouse, Grant, and soon, she believed a legal claim to the child Grant could use to control the remaining trust assets. At the detention center, Evelyn was in a medical observation room rather than a normal cell. A nurse attached a monitor to her stomach. The steady rhythm of her daughter's heartbeat filled the small room. Evelyn turned toward the wall and cried silently. "I'm sorry," she whispered. "You haven't even been born, and they've already made you part of their war." The baby moved beneath her hand. That small movement broke what remained of Evelyn's control. She remembered the nursery Grant had designed, the promises he made beside the ultrasound screen, and the way he once spoke to their daughter as if she were the most precious thing in his world. Now he was using her as property. Nora arrived 2 hours later. "The recording is convincing," she said, "but it's edited. We'll prove that. How long will that take?" "I don't know." Evelyn looked toward the monitor. "I may not have long." Nora sat beside her. Agent Monroe received the real archive. Every original file survived. Then why am I still here? Because the local warrant was issued before federal authorities disclosed the operation. Someone moved very quickly. Madison, probably. But Grant signed the complaint. Evelyn closed her eyes. Even after everything, part of her had believed Grant would stop before sending the mother of his child to jail. That final illusion was gone. Outside the detention center, Roman sat in the back of a black SUV. One phone call to the wrong person could have moved Evelyn before the paperwork was processed. A judge could have been pressured. A police official could have been threatened. 10 years earlier, Roman wouldn't have hesitated. Now, he heard Evelyn's voice in his mind. "I won't protect my daughter by becoming part of another crime." Roman called Agent Monroe instead. "What do you need?" "The full cooperation agreement," Rachel said. "Not the edited version your attorneys prepared for the board. If I release it, my uncle will know I worked with you. He will. My legitimate investors will leave. Some of them. My family will call me a traitor." Rachel's voice remained calm. "Evelyn is sitting in custody because the public believes she joined a Mafia boss. You can remain protected by that reputation, or you can tell the truth." Roman looked through the window at the reporters gathered outside. Release everything. Within an hour, federal prosecutors confirmed that Roman had been a cooperating witness for 6 years. The revelation shocked New York. It also destroyed the central claim against Evelyn. She hadn't joined a criminal conspiracy. She had been assisting a protected federal investigation. Roman's own board suspended him pending review. 2 business partners withdrew from major projects. Salvatore Duca received confirmation that his nephew had betrayed him. Roman lost millions before sunset. He didn't regret it. Agent Monroe then released the audit archive's access record to local investigators. The system had captured Grant's device, voice, location, and recovery token during the attempted deletion. A forensic expert compared the full recording with the version used against Evelyn. Madison's file had been assembled from 7 separate audio fragments. The charges were suspended. Shortly before midnight, Nora entered the medical room carrying Evelyn's coat. "You're leaving." Evelyn stared at her. They know. They know Grant lied. The handcuffs were removed. Evelyn stepped outside through a private entrance. Roman was waiting beside the SUV, but he didn't approach. "You gave them your cooperation agreement," she said. "Yes. You lost control of your company for now. Salvatore will come after you. Probably." Evelyn looked at him for a long moment. "Why?" Roman's answer was simple. "Because you asked me to choose the law." Before Evelyn could respond, Agent Monroe's phone rang. Madison had left Grant's penthouse carrying cash, passports, and copies of the offshore accounts. Surveillance followed her to the underground garage beneath the Plaza Hotel. She never reached her car. Security footage showed Salvatore's men forcing her into a black van. Minutes later, Evelyn received a video. Madison was tied to a chair, her face bruised and terrified. Salvatore stood behind her. "Bring me the archive," he said. or your mother will be taken next. As Evelyn watched the video, another message appeared. Salvatore already knew the address of Teresa's hospital room. Evelyn watched the video twice before Nora took the phone from her hand. Madison was tied to a chair inside an empty warehouse. Blood marked one side of her face. Behind her stood Salvatore Duca, the man Roman had spent years trying to bring down. "Bring me the archive," Salvatore said into the camera, "or your mother disappears before sunrise." Evelyn's first instinct was to run to Teresa's hospital room. Agent Monroe stopped her. "The hospital has been secured. Your mother is being moved through a private entrance." "What about Madison?" Rachel looked at the frozen image. "She helped frame you, stole your medical records, and paid for the attack on your apartment. She still doesn't deserve to die." Roman stood near the window, silent. Salvatore had raised him after his father's death. He had taught Roman how to negotiate, how to recognize fear, and how to punish betrayal. Now Roman understood that the final test had arrived. "I'll meet him," Roman said. "No," Evelyn replied. "You'll work with Agent Monroe." Salvatore demanded that Roman bring the archive recovery token to an abandoned shipping warehouse in Red Hook. He believed the token could still erase the evidence already sent to federal investigators. Rachel created a duplicate device containing tracking software. Roman agreed to wear a recording wire. Before leaving, he looked at Evelyn. "If this goes wrong, then follow the plan," she said. "Don't become the man he trained you to be." Roman nodded. At midnight, he entered the warehouse alone. Madison sat beneath a hanging industrial light. Salvatore stood beside her with two armed men. "You destroyed this family," Salvatore told Roman. "No. You taught us to fear one another and called it loyalty. I made you powerful. You made me useful." Salvatore demanded the token. Roman held it up, but didn't move closer. "Release her first." Salvatore laughed. "She tried to steal from everyone in the room. Why do you care whether she lives?" Roman looked at Madison. "I don't. But the law does." The words were the signal. Federal agents entered through 3 access points. One of Salvatore's men dropped his weapon. The other tried to escape and was arrested near the loading bay. Salvatore grabbed Madison and pressed a gun beneath her chin. Roman could have rushed him. Instead, he lowered his hands and kept him talking until a tactical officer reached a clear position. The shot struck Salvatore's shoulder. Madison fell to the floor alive. As agents placed Salvatore in restraints, he stared at Roman with hatred. "You chose strangers over blood," Roman answered quietly. "I chose to stop calling cruelty family." Hours later, Madison agreed to testify. She admitted paying Calvin Rusk to frighten Evelyn. She claimed she never intended the smoke device to cause premature labor, but she understood that the excuse changed nothing. She also surrendered recordings Grant didn't know existed. By morning, Holloway Capital's emergency board meeting had begun. Grant sat at the head of the table beneath the company logo. His Rolex gleamed as he accused Evelyn of conspiring with the Duca family to steal the firm. "She's unstable," he said. "Everything she presents has been obtained through coercion or criminal access." The doors opened. Evelyn entered wearing a Navy maternity suit. Nora walked beside her. Behind them came Agent Monroe, Daniel Price, an independent forensic accountant, and 2 federal attorneys. Roman remained outside. This was Evelyn's name to reclaim. She connected her MacBook Air to the boardroom screen. First, she showed the dates when her electronic signature had been used. One approval occurred while she was under anesthesia after losing her pregnancy. Another came from Grant's Park Avenue study. Then she displayed the original trust agreement, proving her late father had received shares for saving the company that later became Holloway Capital. Grant had known about the trust for years. He concealed it during the divorce and tried to force Evelyn to surrender property she legally owned. "You were never a founder acting alone," Evelyn said. "You built your public image on work and assets belonging to people you erased." Grant stood. "These documents are false. The board's outside counsel examined the signatures. They're authentic." Grant turned toward Daniel. "Tell them she manipulated the system." Daniel looked terrified, but he didn't lower his eyes. "You threatened my son," he said. "You made me destroy evidence." Grant called him a liar. Then Madison entered under federal protection. Her face was bruised, and she wore no designer clothes or jewelry. She placed her iPhone on the table. Recordings filled the room. Grant could be heard ordering employees to preserve Evelyn's credentials, discussing offshore transfers and planning to blame her if regulators discovered the fraud. Grant's composure collapsed. He pointed at Madison. She organized the attack. She stole from me. Madison gave a bitter laugh. And you planned to send both of us to prison while you escaped. The partnership they once displayed so proudly became a public fight. Grant exposed Madison's theft. Madison revealed Grant's cooperation with Salvatore. Nora waited until they had destroyed each other. Then she presented the final document. During fertility treatment, Grant had secretly signed a declaration denying responsibility for any embryo used after a specified date. He had wanted protection from future financial obligations if he left Evelyn. After the pregnancy succeeded, he told family court that he had always intended to become a father and deserved immediate control of the child. The declaration proved insurance fraud, perjury, and deliberate manipulation of parental rights. Grant stared at his own signature. The board voted unanimously to remove him as chief executive. His company access was terminated. His shares were frozen. Federal agents stepped forward. Grant looked at Evelyn. "We can fix this," he whispered. "Vanessa meant nothing. Madison meant nothing. We can still raise our daughter." Evelyn's eyes filled with tears, but her voice remained steady. "If I had entered that restaurant alone, poor and frightened, would you be asking me to return?" Grant couldn't answer. Security removed his access card and led him toward the elevators. For the first time, the man, who believed he owned everything, left with nothing. Then Evelyn reached for the edge of the table. Pain tore across her abdomen. Blood appeared beneath her chair. Roman rushed inside as she collapsed. While federal agents placed Grant in handcuffs, doctors warned Roman that Evelyn's placenta had separated and they might not be able to save both mother and child. The operating room doors closed before Roman could reach Evelyn. Doctors rushed around her as the fetal monitor sounded a sharp warning. Her blood pressure had risen dangerously and the bleeding wouldn't stop. "The placenta has separated," the surgeon explained. "We have to deliver the baby now." Evelyn fought to remain conscious. "Save my daughter. We're going to fight for both of you." A mask covered her face. The lights above her blurred before the anesthesia took hold. Evelyn thought of every promise she had made to the child inside her. She had promised her daughter a home without fear. She had promised that no one would ever use love as a weapon against her. Now Evelyn feared she might never get the chance to keep those promises. Outside the operating room, Roman stood beside Teresa. Teresa was weak from dialysis and the recent kidnapping, but she refused to sit down. Roman held the old Mont Blanc pen in one hand. It was the only thing Evelyn had been carrying when she collapsed. For years, Roman had believed power could solve anything. He had controlled ports, hotels, lawyers, and men who were willing to hurt others in his name. None of that could open the operating room doors. None of it could guarantee that Evelyn would return. Teresa noticed his shaking hands. "You love her," she said. Roman looked toward the doors. "Yes, then love her without trying to own her." Roman lowered his head. "I'm still learning how." Inside the operating room, the surgeon delivered the baby. For several terrible seconds, there was no sound. Evelyn drifted through darkness, unable to move but somehow aware of the silence. Then a small cry filled the room. It was weak but alive. Tears slipped from the corners of Evelyn's closed eyes. Her daughter was placed in the neonatal intensive care unit. She weighed less than 5 pounds and needed help breathing. But her heart was strong. Evelyn survived the surgery after receiving several units of blood. When she opened her eyes the next morning, Teresa was beside her. "The baby," Evelyn whispered. "She's alive." Teresa began crying. "She has your strength." Roman waited outside until Evelyn asked to see him. He entered slowly, carrying no flowers and making no promises. "They told me what you did." Evelyn said, "You released the cooperation agreement. I should have told you the truth from the beginning. You lost your position. For now, your family may never forgive you." Roman looked at her. "I finally understand that loyalty without honesty is only another kind of prison." Evelyn reached for his hand. It wasn't forgiveness for every secret. It was permission to begin again. They named the baby Hope Teresa Parker. Grant learned about the birth while sitting in federal custody. He requested permission to visit the hospital, but the court denied it. He was allowed to receive one photograph. In it, Hope slept against Evelyn's chest while Teresa sat beside them. Grant stared at the image for a long time. For the first time, there was no company to protect, no audience to impress, and no woman left to blame. Only the consequences of his choices remained. Months later, Grant pleaded guilty to securities fraud, obstruction of justice, identity theft, witness intimidation, and perjury. He received a lengthy prison sentence. His Park Avenue penthouse was sold. His frozen assets were used to compensate investors, former employees, and Evelyn. The company removed the Holloway name from its building. The magazines that once praised Grant's leadership published the full story of how he had stolen his wife's work, hidden her ownership, and tried to take her child. Madison pleaded guilty to illegal surveillance, data theft, obstruction, and hiring Calvin Rusk to frighten Evelyn. Her cooperation reduced her sentence, but it didn't erase her responsibility. The Cartier bracelet was sold at auction. Evelyn directed the money toward a legal fund for women facing financial abuse during divorce. Salvatore Duca was convicted under federal organized crime laws. His illegal businesses were seized, and the workers in legitimate Duca companies were transferred into independently managed operations. Daniel Price testified against Grant. His son received successful heart surgery, and Daniel later became director of cybersecurity for the restructured company. Evelyn recovered the shares placed in trust by her father. She also received compensation for Grant's concealment of her ownership and misuse of her identity. She didn't become wealthy through a miracle. She received what her father had earned and what she had helped build. Evelyn used part of the money to arrange better treatment for Teresa. She purchased a warm brownstone in Brooklyn Heights with a small garden and sunlight in every room. She also created the Parker Integrity Foundation, which helped women uncover hidden assets, secret debts, and financial control inside marriages. Roman didn't ask Evelyn to begin a relationship. For the first year, he simply remained present. He drove Teresa to medical appointments. He learned how to warm Hope's bottles. He repaired the old crib when one side became loose. Most importantly, he never made decisions for Evelyn without asking. Their love grew through ordinary days rather than danger. 18 months later, Roman took Evelyn back to Aurelia. They sat at the same table where Grant had once humiliated her. This time, Evelyn wasn't hiding behind anyone's protection. She had her own career, her own home, and her own name. Roman placed a simple ring beside her glass. "I don't want to give you a new life," he said. "You already built one. I only want the honor of walking beside you." Evelyn said yes. They married in the garden of her Brooklyn home with Teresa, Hope, Nora, Daniel, and Agent Monroe beside them. There were no reporters and no powerful investors, only family. Years later, Evelyn visited Grant in prison and brought a photograph of Hope on her first day of school. Grant cried when he saw it. "Can you forgive me?" he asked. Evelyn stood calmly. "I forgive you so I can remain free, not so you can return." She left the photograph and walked away. Outside, Hope ran into her arms while Roman waited beside their car. Evelyn looked back only once. Then she turned toward the family she had chosen. Grant had tried to erase her, but every lie he told became a stone in the foundation of the life she built without him.